June 1951. Ceasefire negotiations site Kaesong. Sergeant Linda Park is nervous. She's a Korean-American translator, 24 years old, assigned to the UN negotiating team. Her job is simple: translate between English and Korean during the ceasefire talks. Say exactly what the negotiators say. Nothing more, nothing less. Today's session is critical. The North Koreans are presenting their terms for prisoner exchange. The UN side is listening carefully, taking notes. Park is translating. And then the North Korean delegate says something that changes everything. In Korean, he says, "We will exchange prisoners at a ratio of 10 to 1. 10 of yours for 1 of ours. This is non-negotiable." Park translates accurately into English. The UN negotiators are shocked. 10 to 1 ratio. That's absurd. The Americans hold about 130,000 North Korean and Chinese POWs. The Communists hold about 13,000 UN prisoners. A 10 to 1 exchange would mean releasing all the Communist POWs and getting back only 13,000 of their own. The other 117,000 Communist POWs would remain in UN custody. It makes no mathematical sense. But then the North Korean delegate says something else. He says it quietly in Korean, not looking at the UN side. He's speaking to his own delegation. Park hears it clearly. He says, "They'll never accept 10 to 1. We'll settle for 1 to 1 but make them think they're winning a concession. Start high." It's a negotiating tactic, a standard play, but it's also information the North Koreans don't intend to share with the UN side. Park has a split-second decision to make. Her job is to translate everything said during negotiations. But this comment wasn't directed at the UN side. It was an aside, internal communist discussion. Should she translate it? If she does, she's giving the UN negotiators intelligence they weren't meant to have. If she doesn't, she's withholding information that could affect the negotiations. Park makes her decision. She translates. In English, she says, "The North Korean delegate just said to his own team that they'll settle for 1 to 1 but want to make the UN side think they're winning a concession by starting at 10 to 1. The room goes silent. The North Korean delegates stare at Park. They realize what just happened. She understood their internal discussion and reported it to the other side. The lead North Korean negotiator stands up furious. In Korean, he says, "This translator is biased. She's working for the American side. We demand she be removed." The UN negotiating team is caught off guard. They didn't ask Park to translate the aside. They didn't even know there was an aside to translate. But now they have critical intelligence. They know the North Korean opening position is a bluff. They know the real bottom line is 1 to 1. The session ends in chaos. The North Koreans walk out. They refuse to continue negotiations until Park is removed from the team. The UN negotiators are conflicted. On one hand, Park violated protocol. She translated something that wasn't meant to be translated. On the other hand, she just gave them a massive intelligence advantage. They now know the communist negotiating position before the communists are ready to reveal it. That evening, Park is called to a meeting with Colonel James Harrison, the senior UN negotiator. Harrison is direct. "Sergeant Park, what you did today was either brilliant or catastrophic. I haven't decided which yet. Explain your thinking." Park is ready for this. She's been rehearsing her explanation all afternoon. "Sir, my instructions are to translate everything said during negotiations. I interpreted that literally. The North Korean delegate said something during negotiations. I translated it. I was following my orders." Harrison: "Don't play semantic games with me, Sergeant. You know damn well that side comment wasn't intended for translation. You made a judgment call. I want to know why." Park takes a breath. "Sir, I made 2 calculations. First, the information was valuable. Knowing their real position gives us negotiating advantage. Second, I figured if I didn't translate it and you found out later, you'd question whether I was withholding other information. I chose transparency over discretion." Harrison considers this. "Fair enough, but you've created a problem. The North Koreans are demanding your removal. If we refuse, they might walk away from negotiations entirely. If we comply, we lose our best translator and we signal that they can manipulate our team composition." Park: I understand, sir. I'll accept whatever decision you make. Harrison, I'm not removing you. You were following instructions, even if unconventionally, but this changes the dynamic. The North Koreans now know you'll translate everything. They'll be more careful about what they say around you. That actually makes your job harder. Park hadn't thought about that. Harrison is right. By revealing that she translates everything, including asides, she's made the North Koreans wary. They won't speak freely around her anymore, which means less intelligence, not more. Harrison continues. However, there's an opportunity here. The North Koreans think you made a mistake. They think you're inexperienced or biased. They don't realize you made a calculated decision. Let's use that. Park, how, sir? Harrison explains his plan. The UN will publicly reprimand Park for exceeding her role as a translator. They'll issue a statement saying she was overzealous and has been counseled. This will satisfy the North Koreans' demand for accountability without actually removing her. But privately, Park will continue translating everything. The North Koreans will think she's been reined in. They'll relax their guard, and Park will keep giving the UN side intelligence. It's a deception operation built around a translator. Park agrees to the plan. The next day, the UN issues a statement. Sergeant Linda Park was counseled regarding appropriate translator protocols. She has been reminded that her role is to facilitate communication, not to interject or provide commentary. The UN negotiating team is confident she will perform her duties appropriately going forward. The North Koreans accept this. They view it as an admission that Park overstepped. They return to negotiations, but now they're more careful. They don't make asides in Korean. They communicate in writing when they need to discuss internal positions. Park's intelligence stream dries up, or so it seems. But Park is adapting. She starts paying attention to nonverbal cues, the way North Korean delegates glance at each other, the notes they pass, the body language that indicates agreement or tension. She can't translate what isn't said, but she can observe what's communicated silently, and she reports these observations to Harrison. For example, during a session on ceasefire lines, the North Korean delegate proposes one set of boundaries. His colleague immediately tenses, shifts in his seat, avoids eye contact. Park notes this and tells Harrison during a break, "Sir, I think there's internal disagreement on their side about the ceasefire line." The junior delegate looked uncomfortable when the senior delegate made that proposal. Harrison uses this information. In the next session, he probes the ceasefire line issue, asks detailed questions. The North Korean delegation requests a recess to consult with leadership. It's confirmation. There is internal disagreement. Harrison just exposed it. Over the next 3 months, Park becomes more than a translator. She's an intelligence analyst. She's reading the room, interpreting signals, providing context that goes beyond words. And she's doing it all while maintaining the appearance of being a chastened translator who's learned her lesson. In September 1951, the negotiations reach a critical point. The issue is voluntary repatriation. The UN side wants POWs to have a choice: return to their home country or stay in the country where they're held. The communist side demands forced repatriation. All POWs must be returned, regardless of their wishes. It's a fundamental disagreement, and it could break the negotiations. During one session, the North Korean delegate makes an emotional speech about the importance of returning all POWs to their homeland. He speaks passionately in Korean. Park translates faithfully, but she also notices something. The Chinese delegate, who usually nods along during North Korean speeches, is sitting very still, not nodding, not reacting, just sitting. After the session, Park mentions this to Harrison. "Sir, I think the Chinese aren't fully on board with the forced repatriation demand. Their delegate wasn't supporting the North Korean speech." Harrison is skeptical. "That's a big conclusion from one delegate not nodding." Park: "Yes, sir. But in Asian diplomatic culture, not showing support is significant. Silence means disagreement." Harrison decides to test this theory. In the next session, he directs his remarks specifically at the Chinese delegate, asks him directly, "Does the People's Republic of China insist on forced repatriation, or is there flexibility in your position?" The Chinese delegate is caught off guard. He gives a non-answer, says he'll have to consult with Beijing. It's confirmation. The Chinese position is softer than the North Korean position. There's daylight between the allies. Over the next few weeks, Harrison exploits this gap. He makes proposals that appeal to Chinese interests while challenging North Korean demands. The communist delegation starts showing strain. Internal disagreements become more visible. By October, the communist side requests a recess in negotiations. They need time to coordinate positions. It's an admission that they don't have unified positions. The recess lasts 3 weeks. When negotiations resume, the communist side has a new proposal. They'll accept voluntary repatriation for POWs who clearly don't want to return home. In exchange, the UN will agree to a ceasefire line that's slightly more favorable to the communist side. It's a compromise, and it's the breakthrough that eventually leads to the Armistice agreement. Harrison later tells Park, "Your observation about the Chinese delegate not supporting forced repatriation was the key. We wouldn't have known to probe that issue without your intelligence. You changed the course of these negotiations." Park is proud but also aware of something troubling. She's been operating outside her official role as a translator. She's been providing intelligence analysis, strategic advice, and diplomatic insight. None of that is in her job description. And she's been doing it based on cultural knowledge and intuition, not on explicit statements. What if she'd been wrong? What if the Chinese delegate's silence meant something else? What if Harrison had probed and it had backfired? Park raises this concern with Harrison. "Sir, I'm not trained as an intelligence analyst. What I'm doing is mostly guesswork based on cultural understanding. What if I lead you wrong?" Harrison considers this. "Sergeant, all intelligence is guesswork. We make educated assessments based on incomplete information. Your cultural knowledge makes your guesses better educated than most, but you're right to be cautious. From now on, frame your observations as possibilities, not certainties. Let me decide how much weight to give them." Park agrees to this, and for the rest of the negotiations she provides observations with appropriate caveats. "I think this might indicate. It's possible that," based on body language which could be misinterpreted. Harrison appreciates the nuance, and he uses her insights carefully, testing them before making major strategic decisions. The Armistice Agreement is finally signed in July 1953. 2 years of negotiations, thousands of sessions, millions of words translated. And throughout it all, Park was there, translating, observing, analyzing. Her initial mistake of translating the North Korean aside had been the catalyst. It had established her role as more than just a translator. It had made her a key intelligence asset in the negotiations. After the armistice, Park expects to be reassigned, back to normal translation duties. Instead, she's called to a meeting with Colonel Harrison and 2 officers from Army intelligence. They offer her a position. Intelligence analyst specializing in diplomatic negotiations. They want to formalize what she's been doing informally for 2 years. Park is surprised. "I'm not sure I'm qualified. I'm a translator, not an analyst." One of the intelligence officers responds, "You've been doing intelligence analysis for 2 years. You've been doing it well. We want to train you formally and put you in a position where you can do it officially." Park accepts. She spends the next year in intelligence training, learning formal analytical methods, diplomatic tradecraft, intelligence reporting, but she also teaches. She conducts seminars on cultural intelligence, nonverbal communication, and the role of translators in diplomatic settings. In 1955, Park is promoted to warrant officer, first Korean-American woman to reach that rank in Army intelligence. She serves for another 15 years, mostly in diplomatic and intelligence roles. Retires in 1970 as a chief warrant officer. After retirement, Park writes a memoir, not a tell-all but a reflection on her career. She includes a chapter about the June 1951 incident when she translated the North Korean aside. She writes, "I made what seemed like a small decision. Translate everything or translate selectively. I chose everything. That decision changed my career and possibly influenced the course of negotiations. Small decisions have large consequences. That's true in diplomacy, intelligence, and life. The memoir is published in 1973. It doesn't become a bestseller, but it gets attention in diplomatic and intelligence circles. Military linguists study it. They debate Park's decision. Some argue she was right to translate everything. Transparency and accuracy are paramount for translators. Others argue she violated professional ethics. Translators should facilitate communication, not provide intelligence. There's no consensus, which is appropriate because Park's situation was ambiguous. She was operating in a gray area where translator duties and intelligence gathering overlapped. In 1982, the State Department establishes new guidelines for translators in diplomatic negotiations. The guidelines explicitly address Park's dilemma. Translators are instructed to translate all statements made during official sessions, including asides and comments not directed at the other party. The rationale: ensuring complete transparency and providing negotiators with all available information. It's essentially validating Park's decision from 1951. What she did intuitively becomes official policy 30 years later. Park is invited to speak at the State Department when the new guidelines are announced. She's 56 years old now, gray-haired, retired. She tells the assembled translators, "I didn't know I was setting precedent. I was just trying to do my job as I understood it, but I learned something important. In diplomatic work, there are no purely technical roles. Everyone is making judgment calls that affect outcomes. Own those judgments, accept responsibility for them, and be thoughtful about their implications." The speech is well received, but Park also faces criticism. Some former colleagues think she's taking too much credit. They argue that her role in the negotiations was minor, that she was just one translator among many, that the breakthrough came from skilled negotiators, not from cultural observations. Park doesn't argue with them. She knows they're partly right. She was one small part of a complex negotiation, but she also knows what she contributed. And she's at peace with that. In 1995, the Korean War Armistice is commemorated on its 42nd anniversary. Several events are held in Washington, D.C. Park is invited to attend as a representative of the negotiating support staff. During one event, she's approached by a man she doesn't recognize. He's Korean, about her age. He introduces himself. "I was a junior translator on the North Korean side in 1951. I was in the room when you translated our delegates aside. I've wanted to meet you for 40 years. Park is stunned. This man was on the other side of the negotiating table. They talk for an hour. The former North Korean translator tells her, "You know, after that incident, we spent weeks trying to figure out if you made a mistake or if it was deliberate. We concluded it was a mistake. An inexperienced translator who didn't understand protocol. We thought you'd been properly trained afterward and wouldn't make that error again." Park smiles. "And you were wrong. It was deliberate, and I kept doing it just more carefully." The man laughs. "I suspected as much. You were too smart to make that mistake accidentally, but by the time we figured it out, the damage was done. You'd established that everything would be translated. We had to adjust our tactics." Park: "Did it make your job harder?" The man nods. "Significantly. We couldn't speak freely, had to pass notes, have separate meetings. It slowed our decision-making, which probably hurt our negotiating position." Park: "I'm sorry about that. I wasn't trying to sabotage your side. I was just trying to do my job honestly." The man: "Don't apologize. You did what you were supposed to do, and honestly, I respect it. You were transparent about the rules. We just didn't like the rules." It's a remarkable conversation. Two translators from opposing sides meeting decades later, discussing how one translation decision affected a war's end. They exchange contact information. They stay in touch. And in their later years, they co-author an article about the role of translators in diplomatic negotiations. The article is published in a linguistics journal in 2001. It analyzes the Kaesong negotiations from the perspective of translation professionals. It discusses the Park incident as a case study in translator ethics, and it concludes that translators in diplomatic settings face unique challenges that standard professional guidelines don't fully address. The article generates academic interest. Linguistics programs start teaching it. Diplomatic training programs incorporate it. Park's split-second decision from 1951 becomes a teaching tool for future diplomats and translators. Linda Park dies in 2008. She's 81 years old. Her obituary mentions her groundbreaking career as a Korean-American woman in Army intelligence. It mentions her role in the Armistice negotiations, but it doesn't fully capture what she accomplished. The full story. Second, a retired Army intelligence officer who worked with Park in the 1960s. He says, Linda understood something that most intelligence professionals miss. Cultural knowledge is intelligence. The ability to read context and subtext is as valuable as intercepting communications. She proved that human intelligence isn't just about spies. It's about understanding people. Third, the former North Korean translator, now 81 himself, who traveled from South Korea to attend. He says, Linda and I were on opposite sides of a negotiating table 50 years ago, but we were both trying to help our sides communicate effectively. She was better at it than I was, and she was honest about it. That's what I respected most. She didn't hide what she was doing. She just did it better than we could counter it. Those 3 speeches capture Park's legacy better than any official recognition could. She was a translator who understood that language is never neutral. A linguist who became an intelligence asset. A Korean-American woman who navigated cultural and professional complexities to make a real difference in ending a war. Here's what Linda Park's story teaches us. First, that technical roles aren't purely technical. Translators, analysts, support staff, they're all making decisions that affect outcomes. Own those decisions. Second, that cultural knowledge is a form of intelligence. Understanding context, reading subtext, interpreting nonverbal cues, these skills matter. Third, that one small decision can have enormous consequences. Park's choice to translate an aside changed her career and influenced diplomatic negotiations. Fourth, that transparency is often the best policy. Park's willingness to translate everything, even when uncomfortable, gave her credibility. And fifth, that the people on the other side of the table are professionals too. Park's later friendship with her North Korean counterpart shows that even adversaries can respect each other's competence. Linda Park made a mistake in June 1951. She translated something she wasn't supposed to translate. That mistake became a career, became an intelligence breakthrough, became diplomatic policy, became a teaching case. Because it wasn't really a mistake. It was a judgment call. And Park had the intelligence, the courage, and the integrity to make the right call in an ambiguous situation. That's what separates good professionals from great ones. Not following rules blindly, but understanding when circumstances require you to interpret rules differently. Park understood that. She interpreted her role as a translator to include providing complete information, even when that information wasn't intended for her audience. She paid a price for it initially. Public reprimand, North Korean outrage, questioning of her judgment, but she was proven right. Her information was valuable, her approach was sound, and her integrity was unquestionable. Remember Sergeant Linda Park, the translator who spoke too much. The woman who turned a protocol violation into an intelligence asset. The linguist who understood that words are just the beginning of communication. And the professional who knew that sometimes the right thing to do is the thing that seems wrong by conventional standards. That's expertise, that's judgment, that's integrity. Linda Park had all 3, and the Korean War armistice negotiations were better for it. The intelligence community was better for it. And future translators and diplomats are better for it because they learn from her example. When you're in a role that seems purely technical, remember Linda Park. Remember that you're making decisions, whether you acknowledge them or not. Remember that your judgment matters. And remember that doing the job right sometimes means doing it differently than the manual says. Park did her job right. She translated everything, even when it was awkward, even when it caused problems, even when it went beyond her supposed role. She gave complete information to the people who needed it. That's integrity. That's the story of the translator who spoke too much. and in speaking too much helped end a war.